Jen says they did it again. Another healthcare ad that's overrated. Tom says you're losing your touch. The press is underused and not outdated. Killer public relations, marketing, and social media in healthcare requires making the right moves at the right time. Welcome to the Overrated and Underused show. Here's your hosts, experienced marketers Jen Jennings and Tom Testa, with special guest Adrian Stoner. Overrated and underused. The Overrated and Underused show.
Well, Jennifer, it's December 2020, and although everyone's, I'm sure, celebrating, getting ready for the holidays, although a different maybe kind of holiday for a bunch of people this year, I'm glad 2020 is coming to an end. It's been rough sledding for most of us, both on the marketing side and even in our personal lives. So I'm glad 2020 is coming to an end.
2020 was not your year, Tom?
It was not my year. I've had better years, So, I mean, only about 25 of them, of course, with my young age and all. But still, I'm looking forward to 2021. But still, we've had, although 2020 was a different year for us, and we talked a lot about it all year long, about how things like the pandemic have really impacted the way we do things on the marketing side. I think it's been a fun year for us, our first year here on Healthcare Now Radio, and looking forward to the next year ahead.
2020 has been a year of change and adaptation. A lot of what we traditionally have done needed to be reconfigured, and the companies that were flexible and kind of resilient, they're the ones that have fared well through all of this. So yeah, no, I'm definitely looking forward to 2021. A lot has changed this year, and I think, even as we're nearing the new year, I think things will look different, and eventually we may get back to some of those traditional marketing tactics that we used before the pandemic, but not to say, maybe some of this was for the best, and we're kind of moving on to better ways of doing things.
Yep, no, you're right. And, that's why this month's episode is going to be, a little different. Normally we take that overrated and underused approach, as our listeners know, and we run through a couple topics, discuss which are being used too much, which aren't being used accurately, or which ones aren't being used enough. But this month, what we're going to do is, I think, take a look back at the year that was. We had some great discussions, as much as we're going to look ahead as well, but we're going to look at the year that was and kind of run through some of the topics of the many shows we had, the 12 shows we had, 11 shows we had. Sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. And kind of seeing where things stand today, maybe on some of the, Jennifer, with some of the stuff you said about things that were overrated or underused, do they still stand today, right now in December 2020, or are we just on point?
Yeah, certainly I think there'd be a lot of places where Tom's opinions were completely wrong. And
obviously
mine were obviously accurate. But yeah, so it's a very exciting episode because we have a special guest.
Jennifer? What? Really? My mom's joining us?
Come out from behind the curtain. No, it is.
Who is it?
Dave Anderson.
Never heard of him.
Hello, everybody. Good to see everybody. I've been waiting for this. You guys are having so much fun, and I've been checking my email every day looking for the invite, and I haven't gotten until now. So very excited to join your party, and looking forward to it. You guys have been doing an awesome job, and I disagree with almost everything you've been saying all throughout the year, but I think it's a good direction that you're taking with this.
That's an awesome compliment, Jennifer. And I'll take that as a compliment. Disagreeing with us is good. And by the way, Jennifer, email us. It's old school. He's looking for the invite via email. We've been tweeting at him for probably months now, and he hasn't seen it.
I haven't checked my TikTok yet, but I will check that. I usually get most of my news there. So
the formal invitation was sent on TikTok for sure.
Back up here. I mean, we've kind of, Dave made his grandiose entrance, but there's a little bit more to Dave. I mean, people may know Dave Anderson, but Dave Anderson is the Anderson behind Anderson Interactive, who is also a sponsor of this amazing radio show.
Yeah, well, we have a great team here, and just all the people behind this to kind of make this work, and have really been practicing what you guys preach. So everybody's kind of looking forward to each new episode and learning new things about directions for marketing. So everybody loves what you guys have been doing.
Yeah, so Tom and I have kind of been the voices of this show, but Dave's the one that signs the paycheck. So we're just here to share our insights, and then he can yell behind the scenes if we're saying something wrong.
That's
yeah,
right.
the show hasn't been canceled yet, so that's
we haven't been kicked off the air yet, but we've got more exciting things to come in 2021. So stay tuned for.
And renewed for another season, so we're appreciative of the network. So that's great.
Yep. And also, a big part of this program is Adrian Stoner. And although she won't be joining us on this episode,
she's still around. We didn't find her and replace her with Dave.
No. Impossible. Right. Dave is not the new inbox with Adrian. And Adrian will be joining us again in 2021. So again, we're looking forward to more of her insights as well. So I think it's been a great year. We've had a couple bumps and bruises along the way, some growing pains, but I think, I feel we're in a great spot now, even from where we were back in January. So with that, I think we should get started, Jennifer. Dave, what do you think?
Go for it. Sounds great.
All right. And I think, like we said, like Jennifer and I were saying as we start off the show here, let's take a rundown. We'll look at some of the topics we discussed and see where we stand today.
Let's do it.
So to kick this off, back in January, Jennifer, our first topic, what do you even remember? I don't remember what we did last week. What did we do back in January?
I think I blacked out during this whole episode.
Yeah.
I was very nervous. It took us a long time to record our very first episode.
I know. The blooper reels they're going to be a treat. But you know what's odd about this? And it seems strange saying this. January was pre-pandemic.
But there was only it was only 2 episodes before the pandemic.
That's right. Changed it all. But back in January, we talked about during our initial episode, our first ever episode, we talked about blogging versus contributed article.
Yes.
And Dave, I'm sure you're a big fan of the show and you listened to us through there. And we thought, if I remember, Jennifer and I banged heads on how blogging was just overrated. Jennifer was just hammering me home on how blogging was just, it's what we did for years and years ago. And how I thought contributing articles were a thing that we need to do more of.
Yeah, and it's something that's really confusing to a lot of organizations too. I think they don't understand what blogging is and how it's laid out and who the audience is and how you can track views to your site.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of different aspects to blogging, and it could go into more editorial blogs, and which really turns out to be coverage if you really look at it. And so we really push a lot of our clients more toward the contributed article side of things. So that's Underused. We really encourage that a lot. And blogging, just straight blogging in the corporate blog is overrated. So I kind of agree with a lot of things that you guys have talked about initially.
Jennifer, what do you think? Are we still there?
I do. I think so. That's a win for us because Dave agrees with us. Yeah, I think blogging can be done right, but just assuming that it's like you build it and they'll come is not happening. Just because you have a corporate blog doesn't mean that you're necessarily going to have a readership. So it really takes the outreach and the promotion and social media, promotion to drive the readers to even see that content.
Right. And I think what you're saying too is a common theme that we've had throughout a lot of our shows is even if you do want to jump into blogging or you've been blogging, kind of as you're hinting here, it's good. You need to have a strategy around it. It's not one of those, if you build it, they will come type things. So you could have some great content on your
lines, Tom.
Did you say that? I'm sorry. Oh, asterisk. We got to put the footnote at the bottom. Said Jennifer Jennings. But yeah, no, it's true. Yeah, I think it's true. And then.
Cool. Yes. And then so our second episode.
Oh, right.
This was still pre-pandemic, as we thought we were leading into, our major HIMSS annual conference. We debated show giveaways versus pre-show prep.
Right.
So it was a very in-person conference-specific episode, so I think we can just totally throw that out.
Right.
Yeah. So if you listened to that episode, or if you haven't listened to that episode yet, just skip it.
Skip to number 3.
just play one of the other ones twice to make up for it.
I know. It's almost like, I never thought I'd say this, but I miss tchotchkes. Still can't spell it, but I miss them. I mean, I miss going and being.
Dave, can you say tchotchkes?
I can't spell it, but I can say tchotchkes.
See, it's a hard one. It'd be a great Scrabble word, I'm guessing. But yeah, no, I almost miss just running from booth to booth, and of course, looking at all the great stuff, but just grabbing a handful of, pens and.
Yeah, you don't have a mouse pad right now. You don't have zip drive.
we know what's worse. I have no holiday gifts to give people because that was my shot. You know, it's kind of my mini holiday shopping. And here you go. Here's a nice little stress ball, courtesy of Uncle Tom. But now that's not going to happen. Christmas is ruined because there's no tchotchkes to give.
Yeah. The poor children in Tom's family are just
That's
not
right.
getting their gifts this year.
That's right. That's right. Well, and neither is my boss.
Just tell them that Santa Claus got COVID.
That's it. That's a different twist on the night before Christmas. And then, so the first two episodes, we were diving into some topics that were, again, not really impacted by a pandemic that was brewing in the backdrop. And then March hit. And
but I think our March episode was actually recorded in February.
So yeah, that's true. So some of us were still, you're right. Because Hymns this year, my goodness, it seems like, but Hymns this year was supposed to be March, correct?
The first week of March, yes.
Right. Not fair. Okay. Yeah, you're right. So even though you're right, it wasn't set to the backdrop of the pandemic. We were talking about, we're still more on the content side. We were talking about press releases versus opportunistic public relations. And Dave, I know Jennifer and I went back and forth on press releases, but I think you had some insights here on opportunistic PR and kind of what the big picture about that is.
And I think with this one too, it's real similar to the blogging versus contributed articles in that there's an easy way to do things and then there's a more difficult way to do things. And often the more difficult way is the rewards are so much greater, when you can build those relationships with the media and you can have that third party reassurance for your messaging. So it does take time. It takes work. It takes a lot of effort on your part. It's to do some of the opportunistic PR and to uncover those opportunities. But I think you guys had some great points on that episode because it's just finding those ways in which you can get the best coverage for what you're doing.
We've seen this even most recently with one of our clients who's a cybersecurity expert, and we've seen this with the latest ransomware attacks happening in healthcare. And again, they were massive threats. HHS, other federal agencies got involved, issuing warnings of these threats. And what happened? The media wanted to talk about it right away. I mean, these things were happening obviously in real time and by the hour things were changing. And we had to snap right into action with our expert and who could analyze, break down what this means for the industry, what this might look like. Again, all the planets had to align. But you have to get, the reporters aren't looking for a deadline 3 days from now. They're looking an hour from now. So that was an opportunistic public relations opportunity that in this case worked out well because we had our expert, we had the timing, we had the content, and we were able to get it to the reporter, both some interviews, some written form quotes to the reporters and get them what they needed for that story happening that day. So I think we're seeing a lot more of that too. I think a lot of the industry is trying to get on board with some of this opportunistic public relations because in a year where there's not a lot of maybe new products or other big news coming out and big event news, I think being opportunistic is a good way to get your company front and center in 2020 and possibly in beyond in the year ahead.
Here we are. It's our 4th episode and we are discussing in-person meetings versus virtual events.
Right.
Kind of just seems like a no-brainer at this point well, even if you love in-person events and, that's been your go-to forever, they're just not happening. So they're overrated by default because It's not going to be part of your marketing strategy for the next year plus.
Really didn't have a choice this year. I mean, it's
right.
But I think, that's the challenge though, is some organizations took that as a non-choice and said, well, we can't do it in person, so we're not going to do it at all.
Right.
And missed out on some great opportunities for some virtual events. There were some associations that did an outstanding job with their events this year under really tough conditions and tough circumstances, and others not so much. And so if you took advantage of them and you found great ways to market your message and get out there and participate in those virtual events, then you're the ones that won and had some great results out of it.
Right. And it's tough because not every organization was prepared to pivot in that way, to go from, they had been doing in-person events, whether it was their own event or industry events they were attending, but they just weren't prepared to pivot. And I don't know what you both think. I'll ask it to either of you. Do you think more companies who weren't prepared back in, when was this episode? I guess it was April when it aired. Do you think more are better prepared today than they were back in April?
I think it's a mixed bag almost. I think there's some companies that have realized that, okay, well, we're going to, we can't just sit on our hands for a year and a half until we can be back in person. But there's some companies that did that, and they said, we hate virtual events. We don't know how to sell in virtual events. Like, it's not the same. We get no value out of it. And we're just not going to do it. We're just going to save our money and wait until they come back.
Yep.
But there are those other companies that say, and there's different types of virtual events. Like there's some associations and organizations that do them really well. So it does depend on kind of the market and who you're selling to, but there's such a spectrum of events that to kind of lump all virtual events together, I think is almost unfair in that, like, there's virtual events that have full trade show floors, and there's ones that have, meeting rooms. And then there's some that, the sponsors are kind of worked into the educational sessions and like part of the conference. There's a lot that do really great virtual networking sponsored events. And so it's just a matter of the companies that have seen success this year through virtual events have been the ones that have adapted their selling style to that environment, or have kind of adjusted and adapted, and not just said, yeah, we don't know how to sell in virtual. It just doesn't work for us.
Well, Dave, we didn't just bring you on the show to look handsome. Tell us how, Jennifer just said, a lot of folks have tried to pivot nicely and move towards more of a virtual format. Do you think we're seeing any fatigue on the virtual side at the end of 2020? And if so, how do some of these companies strike the right balance in 21?
It really kind of leads into the next topic if you're talking about inaction versus action. That episode, if you take a look at it, it really is a microcosm of this year in marketing. And some organizations froze up, and they didn't know how to market themselves if they weren't doing it the exact same way they've been doing it for years and years. And others transitioned. We had organizations completely change their business model and look for new ways of launching new apps or new products in different ways that they weren't able to do in person. They couldn't count on that booth where you have leads walking up to your booth one after another. And so if you can find other ways through changing up your messaging or email outreach or producing webinars, yes, there is fatigue, but at the same time, you can't stop. It's those organizations that stop that are having such a hard time right now and failing. And this year, for us, this is one of our biggest years.
Right.
We've grown. We've added a number of clients this year. We've added a number of staff this year. And it looks really strong on the horizon for us because we were able to adapt. And I think working with our clients to kind of get them to that new space and find new ways in which to interact in this changing market.
Right. And I hope that, like you said, if, a lot of folks had to kind of shift the way their business model, and hopefully they got a lot of good ideas from listening to our show, because I think we came up with some good alternatives for a lot of folks, because I don't think it's a stretch to say a lot of these folks had budgets that were earmarked for travel, earmarked for events, in-person events. And I think they might have been able to put those dollars into some other new initiatives. So instead of just saying, well, we're going to be inactive and we're not going to be, we don't have events, so we're just going to be inactive, and kind of there's a pandemic happening. So there's not much for us to do here. Hopefully a lot of them turn that into action.
Yeah, you saw as soon as HIMSS was canceled in March, people didn't know what to do. And they're like, we'll just wait to see what happens until this dies down, and then we'll get back into it again. Well, you can see it's not gonna.
No.
The next year is going to be a big year for a lot of organizations, and they got to figure out where they're headed and how they're going to market themselves. So whether it's the health IT vendors that we're working with, or I know that you have that great Clinicians Corner segment, and I think that's going to be important for healthcare as well, and those clinicians.
If you are just tuning in, you're listening to Overrated and Underused on Healthcare Now Radio. Today's episode is our 2020 year in review.
With special guest, Dave Anderson.
That's
right.
Yes.
Well, we're about the halfway point, Jennifer, in terms of the topics for topics for 2020 shows. For June and July, we had our social media explosion. Yeah, and I think a lot of it we did. We ran down a lot of, the platforms people are using, the strategy behind them. Again, I still think social media, obviously, I think that might have been the one platform, if you guys both agree, that may have been pandemic ready, because I don't know, maybe what was posted is different, but social media still, it was strong before, maybe is even more important now than before. What do you guys think?
I definitely think, social media is definitely as important now as it was then. I think it's definitely a component that a lot of healthcare organizations from everywhere, vendors to clinicians to practices, everything should have as part of their marketing strategy. And I think a lot of people are turning to that. It's just that's kind of constant news cycle connection with other people that they're not seeing in person now.
Yep. And I don't know what you guys think, but I think LinkedIn too has played even maybe a bigger role. I think I've seen a lot of, folks get more active on there, more thought leadership-ish on there. Even I think there's been some connections with virtual events via LinkedIn. So I think, the LinkedIn groups have come into play a lot more too. So I think the way LinkedIn's been used and will probably continue to be used, I think we're going to see that more and more in 21.
Yeah, and you're right about the thought leaders too. You're seeing more executives participating, and we're really encouraging, our clients to really spend more time, spend more effort into this, and we're helping them set them up. But that's really where you have those engagements and where you're going to grow your network. So having that individual interaction with social media and not just from the corporate voice, the corporate messaging. So
right,
we're seeing more and more of our clients that are doing that, more interactive, and you have executives playing off each other, and we try to do the same thing with our accounts too. We're trying to do a little bit more than we have, but that's important too.
Absolutely. And in the last few episodes over the past few months, we had a couple other really good topics. I don't really know if much has changed in terms of what we said then versus, couple months, couple weeks after. But here's an idea. We still want to run through them. We want our audience to hear about just as a good recap of what we did. And I think maybe it's time for a good speed round. Rapid fire at you guys. You tell us overrated, underused, August. And with August, it was latest design trends, the good, the bad, the ugly. Design trends. Dave, go.
Overrated.
Overrated.
Jennifer.
What do you mean? All of design is overrated? No, Dave, that episode doesn't work for rapid fire.
No, it really doesn't. It really doesn't.
We talked about, overrated things in design, like overused stock photography of handshakes and stethoscopes and clip arts and globes and smiling faces and just all the things that you see over and over and over and over again without the creativity. And then we talked about, just really having some experienced design resources wherever those, may come from, whether it be, your agency or in-house or contractors, versus that can give a more artistic, editorial type, just a more sophisticated look to your brand than stock photography.
Yep. And that was why those are some, I think, still some really good tips to look at as many folks turn the calendar to 2021. And the same, although we're kind of going a little bit out of order here, but the same can be said, I think, about website development trends too. Broke down the same kind of aspects. And Jennifer, I don't know if you have anything more to add in terms of what we discussed there or what might be new or people should look for in 21.
No.
Underused.
Underused. Dave says they're underused. They are. Yeah. You're right. They probably are. I don't know why, but I'm just going to say they are to agree with him.
Well, we said pre-planning your website is kind of underused, and it's a huge undertaking. It's a very important aspect of anybody's marketing. I don't think any of those thoughts have changed. I think even more now. I think in 2020, a lot of companies are, maybe they're not going to events. Maybe they have extra budgets and they're thinking about what they should be doing. And, maybe it's time to revamp that website. So yeah, I think that was a lot of.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. And again, it all comes down to inaction versus action. You take a look at times like this where you can't be at in-person events and you can't be traveling and you can't manage your sales force as you did before. Now's the time we look inward and you look at improvements that you can make to your own branding, your own messaging, your own website, and revamp those things so you're ready when things open up and when 2021 hits, you're ready for that.
And then we've got the final two episodes that we touched upon in 2020, the year that was. Back in, I believe this would have been September, we talked about awards versus case studies. And maybe we take a minute or two on this. We don't have much time left in today's episode, but what do we think? Awards versus case studies, overused, underrated. Where are we?
Awards are overrated.
Overrated. All right. Jennifer, do we agree with them?
Yes, I think our stance was that everything except the HIPMIC Health
That's right.
of the Year award.
That's right.
Everything else is garbage. Just throw it in the trash.
But case studies, underused. Good piece of marketing content, talks about customer wins, so on and so forth. What do you think?
It can be overrated if they don't have, a lot of meat behind them. It's just, you got to have a good story. But once you do have a good story, assuming that everybody has amazing products, amazing customers that are doing wonderful things across healthcare, you want to be able to interact with those customers and get them to share their stories, because
the story is always there. You can find a good story. You can uncover. You just got to dig enough.
Yep. And then finally, last month's episode, we talked about written versus spoken, the written word versus spoken content.
Those are both underused. They're both, I think. The written content that organizations are putting out there, the challenge is just finding ways to get it out there. So if it has to be written, if it has to be spoken through podcasts and radio shows and TV spots, whatever it happens to be. But depending on the case, both of them are underused.
That's all the time we have from you, Dave. You're not allowed to disagree with us, so we've got to go.
I know, but you know what? But we do have 5 minutes left. I'd say we got about 5 minutes, and I do want to kind of maybe get our crystal ball going just a little bit to give our listeners a taste of what we think maybe 2021 is going to look like across the marketing and communication spectrum. Dave, what do you think? Any insights as we close out 2020?
That's a great question, Tom. 2021, we're all looking forward to it, but I think you're going to see a return to normalcy in a lot of these areas. I think going back to some traditional methods for marketing, but people still need to be on their toes. They still need to be ready and flexible to evolve to whatever's next.
I think there'll be a growth across digital marketing, digital content, so strong social media use, the spoken content that we talked about in our last episode with video use and absence of traditional sales methods. Digital marketing is going to play a larger role.
Although you're right, there's going to be a return to some normalcy because I think it has to. And I think, for a lot of organizations, but I still think we've seen a great many companies and marketers evolve on a lot of fronts. So 2021, I think we're going to see more of an expansion of what marketers are capable of and what they can do, either working with an agency like ours or even in-house, some of the marketers that are listening to our show that don't work with agencies. But I still think their skill set will be continuing to evolve. I think we're going to see a lot more, maybe even professional development on a lot of these fronts, whether it's getting more into web stuff or simple design or things of that nature. So I really do. I think we're going to continue to see an evolution of marketers, of publicists and their skill sets. Because I think as we've said, some of this stuff has changed possibly forever. I know that's kind of cliche and we're hearing that phrase a lot with everything when it comes to the pandemic. Oh, the way we shop and the way we eat at restaurants and but I think it is true. I think some things will change. And I think how you reach your target audience, your constituencies, needs to evolve as well.
Well, thanks to our ONU groupies for listening in to this episode and listening to us all year long in 2020. And we look forward to a great 2021 where we are still on the air and not kicked off yet. So we are sponsored by Anderson Interactive and can be heard weekdays at 10 a.m., 6 p.m., and 2 a.m. Eastern on Healthcare Now Radio. And you can still email your inbox with Adrian questions to hello@andersoni, that's the letter I.com, or tweet us at Jen_Jennings, Tom_Testa, or Adrian_Stoner, and follow us with the hashtag #OverUnderRadio.
And most importantly, happy and healthy holidays, everyone.
Thanks for listening to the Overrated and Underused Show with your hosts, experienced marketers Jen Jennings and Tom Testa, and special guest Adrian Stoner.